My name is Toki Golami, and I'm a young adult librarian at the Woodland Hills branch of the Los Angeles Public Library. And I'm joined today by my colleague Ramin Naderi, the adult librarian 3 at the Mar Vista branch. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that if you have any questions in Farsi or Dari, you can type it right in the chat and we will respond to you in Farsi or Dari. سلام به همه، خوش اومدین به برنامه امروز. میتونید امروز سوالاتون رو به فارسی یا زبان دری هم از ما بپرسید و ما به اونا پاسخ خواهیم داد.
We would like to pay respect to and recognize and acknowledge the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the first caretakers of this land that we live on, which is known as Los Angeles nowadays. We recognize and acknowledge their elders, past and present, as well as their descendants. For information on which territory you may reside on, check out native-land.ca.
Today's program is part of a programming series called Khane, a place of belonging, which focuses on welcoming and centering the Afghan community and Afghan culture at the library, especially the Afghan families who have recently chosen Los Angeles as their new home. We will share more about our upcoming programs shortly, so stay on. This project was made possible with support from California Humanities, a partner of the National Endowment of the Humanities. And of course, we want to thank our generous donors, the Lenore S. and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund, as well as the Library Foundation, and our amazing behind-the-scenes staff for helping the library bring these author programs to you virtually. Thank you all so very much.
Yes, thank you. It's our utmost pleasure to welcome you to today's Your Author series featuring young adult author Zahra Omar Shansab and children's author Bahram Rahman as they discuss their books, stories, and experiences of immigration. Zahra's Lightchaser tells the story of war, patriarchy, and uncertainties of the life of a teenage Afghan girl as a refugee. And Bahram's Sky Blue Bench, it's right here, reminds us that while the war impacts the most basic needs of children in Afghanistan, resilience, resolve, a sense of community, and above all, gender equality can offer a path to a brighter future.
So don't forget to email ecdept@lapl.org for your chance to be entered into an opportunity to win a copy of Lightchaser or Sky Blue Bench. And feel free to type your questions in the chat box. We will answer them after the discussion. And now, for what we have all been waiting for, let's welcome Zahra and Bahram.
Hi everyone. Salam Tuki Jan.
Salam Zahra Jan.
Salam.
Salam Bahram Jan.
Hi everyone. Salam. It's good to be here. Thanks for having us.
And thank you for whoever is joining us this evening. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we dive into our questions, I want to quickly read your bios. Zahra Jan began writing poetry and short stories when she was in 4th grade in Kabul, Afghanistan. She was forced to leave her treasured first collection of poetry and short stories behind when she had to flee Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation. She lived in India for several years and subsequently immigrated to the United States. With a background in psychology, Zahra works with children of diverse backgrounds and empowers them to tell their own stories. She's the recipient of several awards for her books, The Shoeshine of Kabul and The Lightchaser that we will be talking about today.
Bahram Rahman was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, and grew up during the Civil War and the first Taliban regime. He earned a medical degree at Kabul Medical University and a master's degree in public policy at the University of Erfurt, Germany, while also working as an activist in Afghanistan in the areas of gender equality and youth political participation. Bahram moved to Canada as a refugee in 2012, and today he is a senior policy advisor at the Ministry of Health in Ontario. Bahram's The Library Boss was a finalist in the Governor General's Literary Award, and his most recent book, Sky Blue Bench is a recipient of various prestigious awards. Welcome and خوش اومدین.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in. But before we start talking about your books, I want to ask an overarching kind of question. Why do you write? How do your books and stories respond to the situation we're currently seeing in Afghanistan and Iran? Aria, would you like to go first?
I love to write. I love the process of creating. And as far as I can remember, growing up in Afghanistan as a child, I had my nose in a book or a magazine all the time. I was a voracious reader. Books were my friend. They were my companions. And at the time, because of the situation in Afghanistan, they were a source of distraction and comfort, just the way books are to Pari, the character in Lightchaser. And because of the past and personal experiences, I've been fascinated by people, by their resilience, by their struggles, by their hopes and desires, and simply by human conditions. And and one thing that I would like to achieve through my writing is also to give a voice to the voiceless and speak up, for people who cannot speak up for themselves, especially children, which makes the process of writing that much more special for me.
Thank you. How about you, Bahram?
Oh, I consider myself more of as a storyteller than a writer, I would say. I love stories. I grew up with stories. I remember stories of Zahra Omar, my grandma and my granddad, and those were the stories that it was our bedtime stories. So I love that the process of it. And from the bio, it's obvious that I didn't start writing like young. I'm by profession. I'm a doctor. I love science and like math, and what it kind of for me was the moment that I kind of realized that there are so many Afghan stories out there, but they're not told by Afghans. So the voice of Afghans, especially outside Afghanistan, was kind of missing, especially in children's literature. So that kind of became the reason to do something about it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what do you hope to do with your stories?
Oh my God, this is a very loaded question. I would say, I don't know. I think I want to, especially because my stories are written in English, so generally for children living outside Afghanistan, Afghans or non-Afghans. I do want to share, like, in a way, I want to give them an opportunity to kind of get closer and get to know, make a new friend in a different country. So for me, it is just, I call it the small window that I can open for Afghanistan and an Afghan voice is there. So that is generally what I want to, I hope, and I hope I'm able to, I have succeeded in it. So.
You certainly have.
Thank you very much, both. So can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your stories of immigration? Of course, as much as you would like and you feel comfortable to share.
Bahram, you want to go first? Yeah.
Sure. So I was born in Afghanistan, and I grew quite almost more than half of my life in Afghanistan. So in some way, if you are an Afghan, you at some point in your life, you have been displaced, you have been forced to leave your home, and many people probably multiple times. So I remember my friends, every year, in some ways, when I think about it, every year in my class when I was there, regardless it was school or university, I lost a friend because he just left and they were forced. And at some point I did too. So I think that is kind of the reality of it. That war in Afghanistan has been going on for so many years. It's I'm almost turning 40, and it has been pre my date of my date of birth. So that is at some point you will kind of forget about when it started and how it started and where are we with it. And so for me, being a refugee, being an immigrant is my identity, and it's probably the most stable identity I have ever had. Yeah, and I'm glad that I'm able to talk about it here with you.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I also grew up during the Russian invasion and occupation. Like Bahram John said, that we all know, like family members, friends, that whoever that probably like a lot of people who actually were forced to flee, and we knew that at one point we may have to, but it was not kind of like 100%. We were not sure, but obviously when the Russians troops were about to pull out from Afghanistan, the situation was becoming very uncertain, even more uncertain, more volatile, and there was anticipation of vacuum of power and everything else that could have probably would have taken place. My dad decided to send us to India for a few months. So that is the reason we decided to go to India and kind of wait it out and see if the situation improved. We were planning to go back. But unfortunately, we had to leave my father behind because of the fact that they wouldn't issue a passport for him. So my brother and my mom and I traveled to India. We ended up staying there in there for quite a few years, which were not initially our original plan. And then we lived there in India and then eventually we immigrated to the States. And like many Afghans, like Bahram John said, an immigrant and a refugee is a part of our identity.
Yeah, it's like I remember, like you probably talking about like a beginning of 90s and end of 89.
That's correct, yeah.
I remember like that was the time, for example, my dad sold everything we had because we were planning to go too, and then for whatever reason, family or level of comfort, because it's not easy to leave everything. And by everything, I mean it is literally everything. It's your memories, it's your emotions, it's your contact that you have with the land, with the culture. It's just not like you're leaving your house or a few goods here and there. It is you approach yourself and you are taking it. And I think it's a lot to ask for any human being. So it was yeah, it took me back to those days when Zahra, you were talking about it, that
yes,
like we planned to do it, but it didn't happen for us at that time.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then like you said, I had friends, I had classmates, and I remember that my best friend decided to flee, but they were going to go to Pakistan first, and they were on the way there, they were actually apprehended. They spent a few days in prison. And I remember that when I went to school and I didn't see her, I went back home and I cried so much because I had lost so many friends to the fact that they were fleeing. And I told my mother I didn't want to go to school anymore because all my friends were leaving and all my best friends were no longer there in school. And then, of course, after a month, I saw her again. And of course, I was very excited for the fact that I got my friend back. But then she told me the horror story and the ordeal they had to go through because of the fact that they wanted to leave, but they couldn't. And so, yeah, those are stories we heard over and over and over again. Like, that was kind of the new normal for us at that time.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's still stories that we all are living with everything that's happening nowadays in Afghanistan and Iran and countries in that region. I love how you bring these experiences to your writing. I have a question about that, but before I ask that question, I wanted to give our audience a little bit of a cultural nugget, as I call it. Some of our viewers may have noticed that as we address each other, we use the adjective John. So I'm gonna pose this question out of order. Maybe Bahram, would you like to talk a little about that?
Oh,
it's
of course,
most certainly not part of your name, right?
No, that's the thing. I wanted to tell everyone we are not cousins. So we don't have the same last name. So John is a way. It's in English literal translation would be dear. It's this way that we address generally Farsi speaking people address each other. It's a way of respect. It's a way of showing intimacy. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's a term of endearment.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. June and John, yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Awesome. So now let's talk a little about Pari and Aria in your respective books. I love both characters and how you have kind of developed them. But I want to pose this question, but feel free any way you would like to address it. I want us to talk a little about the process of a child becoming an immigrant. You just talked about your own experience, but I guess my question is that how this process is depicted in your book and how you show that kind of displacement in your stories.
The process of becoming a refugee or an immigrant and refugee, I guess, is I think unique to each and every individual.
Yeah.
How they experience it, their thought process is it all depends, on them, on their personality, on their characters. But and also we make the journey through that process in different ways. Some have to travel the very rough terrains. Some have to sail through the rough oceans and seas, and some have to walk, travel over the minefields, like Pari and her family in my book. But it is extremely traumatizing. It's a scary situation, and then also we have to keep in mind that a lot of we have heard, like on the news, we have seen that a lot of those people don't even make it. So it is for Pari and her family. This process of being uprooted is extremely difficult for her. She has a hard time she has a hard time accepting the fact that they're leaving everything behind, it's a scary and tough conditions under which she has to flee and go somewhere for safety.
Definitely. And for Aria, even though she still lives in her house, it seems like she also goes through a lot of those emotions.
Absolutely. Like I try my best to write stories that are inspired, informed by my own experiences, by the people I have met in my life, regardless of when. Was it probably during school or later on in life? Like the whole character of Aria in this book is very much informed by one of my classmates, and there was also an occasion that we had to build our own benches because those things happen in Afghanistan. Like so for me, it is to make sure that not only that the story is authentic, but at the same time I'm telling a story to children, so it has to be translatable to children to get the essence of it. I also kind of it is my like one of the biggest goal in writing to make sure that to capture the joy, the happiness, the childhoodness of like children in Afghanistan and in their stories. Here, Aria is not feeling in a way. She feels sad and depressed for a while, but she is this problem solver. And I have met so many children in my life in Afghanistan, and including my own classmates, that there are so many problems they solve in their lives every day that it's just beyond like a normal count. And I just wanted to make that as the main characteristic of this story. So.
Yeah, and I love that. And I was just reading the book again in preparation for the program today, and I was reading it through the lens of my daughter, who has lived their whole life here. And I was thinking about the kids going out and trying to find the material to build a bench. And I was thinking how authentic and also representative of the environment that act is by itself. So why don't we actually move on to reading some excerpts from your books? I think everybody's excited and ready to hear from you. So the floor is yours. Whoever would like to go first.
Zahra, you want to go first?
Sure. So, Paris reached the strip of the spice stores. The myriads of colors displayed were astonishing. The burlap sacks were lined up uniformly, each filled with salt, red pepper, turmeric, cumin, black pepper, and saffron. Her feet began to sting as shreds of ice stubbornly poked holes through the plastic bags wrapped around her feet. When she squatted down to brush the snow off her shoes, she noticed the little eyes looking at her from underneath the spice store's wooden platform. The little limping dog was curled up and visibly shaking in the cold. Marie quickly looked around, and every few seconds, when no one was looking, she moved closer and closer to the little dog. She wanted to grab the little dog without scaring it away. Suddenly, all changed. A deafening sound of an explosion invaded the surroundings. The ground shook vehemently. The instant smell of smoke and gunpowder violated her senses. Paris remembered seeing a plume of smoke and flames lurching towards her. But by then, she could no longer hear, and if that flaming monster was roaring, Paris was happy she could not hear it. You cannot catch me, Paris thought, as she tried to hold onto the ground that was quickly slipping from underneath her. People were running. Some stepped on her, while others tripped and fell. Paris tried to stay alert. She struggled to keep her eyes open, but it felt like a dark, heavy blanket was gradually pulled over her senses. She felt the burning pain, but could not distinguish which part of her body was throbbing. Her eyelids got heavier. She choked on the smoke. She moved her arm in an attempt to locate grandfather's crutch. No, I am not going to fall asleep, she whispered, but a dark, savage monster was killing all her senses one by one. The screams and loud noises began to fade in the distance as Paris struggled to stay alert. Her many attempts to get up were overpowered by some massive force that kept her pinned down to the ground. As she drifted into a state of unconsciousness, it felt as if she was walking through a long, dark tunnel with no end in sight. It was cold, and she was walking alone. Voices echoed in the tunnel, but she was not able to see any faces. She heard her mother calling her name. She heard Alia's voice echoing in the tunnel over and over again. Are you planning to turn into a ghost? She heard footsteps and looked back, but there was nothing but darkness. She hurried towards a small yellow spot that appeared suddenly in the distance. She hoped it was the rays of a sun that would guide her out of the darkness. She took off running until the yellow spot got closer. At that moment, she felt something warm on her forehead. She slowly opened her eyes. There were two little eyes staring back at her. His little tongue licked her forehead one more time. As she lay there, she was terrified to look around, as the commotion and screams were becoming gradually audible again. She looked at the little dog that was sitting right next to her. When her eyes could focus better, she realized he was completely covered by a bright yellow spice powder. She gathered all her strength as she sat up on the sidewalk. She hesitantly looked back and froze with fear. A monstrous fire was burning in the middle of the bazaar. Soldiers were screaming, firing shots. She could not tell if the screams were louder or the gunshots. She quickly looked away and struggled up to her feet. As soon as she was able to stand up, she grabbed grandfather's crutch and quickly scooped up the little dog. She wrapped him up in her mother's burqa and ran away. Something warm trickled down her face, and she felt lightheaded and nauseated. She did not want to pass out again, so she made an effort to block the chaos behind her and focus on the little dog. He just nestled quietly in her arms, shaking every now and then. You must be in shock too, Paris thought. She tried to run as fast as she could, but the frozen ground worked against her, and she slipped and tripped numerous times. Once she was far enough from the terrifying sounds faded substantially. She leaned against the wall in an alleyway and gasped for air. The alleyway was almost deserted. With the sound of each explosion, frightened people took to their homes, locked the doors, and huddled together. Paris slid down against the wall and sat on the ground, on a pile of dirty snow. She put the little dog, still wrapped up in her mother's burqa, next to her. His little yellow head popped out from underneath the burqa and curiously looked at Paris. You don't like the burqa either, right? Paris patted his spice-covered head as she tried to shake off some of the yellow powder from his fur. He took a step forward and began to lick her hand. Paris smiled and rested her head against the wall. The throbbing pain in her head was now even more pronounced. She realized she needed to get up and hurry home, but the bottom of her right foot was burning intensely. Her foot felt numb and heavy. She looked down and noticed that her foot was bare and her shoe was missing. The plastic bag she had tied around her foot was torn and shredded. With all the fear and panic that seized her body and mind, Paris had not noticed her shoe was left behind. Paris' heart sank. That was the only pair of shoes she owned. The loud sound of a machine gun startled Paris, and she quickly got to her feet. Her heart began to pound and her hands began to tremble. She hurriedly scooped up the little dog and began to run. We need to run before they get us, Paris cried out as loud as she could, and then took off running and limping at the same time.
It's wonderful. Thank you. The relationship between Peri and Zafaron or Saffron, yes, is a unique one in this book. Thank you. Okay, Bahram, we're all ear.
Oh, well, thanks, Zahra. I don't know how to follow after that. I think it was so beautifully visually depicted. I think the feelings
thank
and
you
the
so
chaos.
much. Thank you.
So I'm going to read just two spreads from A Sky Blue Bench. So this story tells the story of Aria, who has a prosthetic leg, and she is returning back to school after recovering from her injury. And she's finding it very difficult to sit because there are no benches or chairs. So she had a bad day at school, and now she is at home, and she had a cry with her brother and mother, and she is in her bedroom. So this is the page. This is one of my favorite pages, and it really connects with her eyes connects with the readers. So Aria lay on her bed with her eyes wide open. She thought about how much she would miss school if she never went back. She wouldn't be able to read or write. Something must be done, she said to herself. It was right before dawn when a brave idea came into her mind. I will build myself a bench. Surely that will help. Thanks, Ramin. When Aria told her classmates about her idea, they laughed and said, "Girls don't build benches." "I can do anything a boy can," Aria replied firmly. I think this is the spirit of Aria, and I'm so glad she also has a friend. And I'm so also I want to say thank to the illustrator who did a wonderful job capturing that spunkiness, that sense of fierceness of Aria. And if you want to read more to know what happens, you can read this.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you both for sharing. That was great. That was beautiful. Okay, so I didn't want to stop the
Before we
question.
move on, I just wanted to kind of echo what Bahram John said about the illustrations. They are fantastic. I mean, all of those emotions that you were talking about earlier come through as you look
absolutely.
at the
Like I was very lucky with my publisher Pajama Press and my illustrator Peggy Collins. She's not Afghan and she's never been to Afghanistan, but I think there's that sense of universality of a child that she wanted to capture. Um, Through pictures and memories, I think she created a wonderful, vibrant scenes of Afghanistan, especially the market scene. And if for people who have been to Afghanistan, they would notice that this book, the place happens, the location is Herat, because there's a mosque, which is kind of, that is how when I was writing the book, I was thinking about the back alleys of the old city in Herat, and the Blue Mosque, and all of that. So.
Yeah, and the prominence of sky blue color, which is the color of peace, as you said, in the book itself.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, okay, I'm gonna move on to the next question. Do you have any advice for young people who want to become authors, especially those of immigrant backgrounds? Zahra, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure. I I would like to say that to read, read and read, as much as you can. But most of all, I think it's important to write from your heart, write with conviction, and write what you believe in, and I think the rest will follow.
Absolutely, I will emphasize the same thing. Read as much as you can, and it's you, especially in out like in places like here, like you have so many wonderful books that are free accessible through public libraries, and support your libraries too. But I want to say also, like, I think as an immigrant, as newcomers, as a person of color, we generally have a bit of a fear of not telling our stories. We keep our stories very private, and for good reasons. I think, especially for example in Afghanistan, like they don't share with strangers their family stories. And when you write, you have to be very personal. You have to be intimate. You have to open your heart. So I would say just do not be afraid. Just pour your heart on a paper. I think the language, the beauty of that will come after. There will be someone who will read it, and just do not be afraid of writing. It is, and your story is worth it as everyone else is there, and it's as important as everyone else's. So go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. We got some comments that I'd like to read them. They say both of your stories are so moving,
Oh,
and another attendee says that what a powerful story. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up on what you were just saying, and I wanted to, Bahram John mentioned our bedtime stories, and I wanted to talk very quickly about the oral culture and how strong it is among our communities, even here in Los Angeles, or the communities that you both are residing in. How do you see that as a place to start storytelling, as you were earlier saying, Bahram?
Oh, absolutely. Like so my great grandfather used to apparently organize the reading of Shahnama at our village in Pine Share. So he would invite, especially it happens during winter, so people didn't have much to do, farmland, there was nothing to work on. So he would organize these sessions and invite friends, and they would hang out together, and they would read and recite Shahnama, or the Book of Kings. Um, so that kind of, not only that tradition, and I think there's so much more in terms of family histories and culture that is transferred through like oral traditions. And I think it is so important to kind of to keep with that, but at the same time, I would say that is how stories have transferred to us, but continue to write and keep that kind of both traditions alive. Because when if you are in a recital of Shahnama or any other Persian poetry book, you will feel it differently, and you will have goosebumps, and it will be probably the best day of your life. It is absolutely amazing to experience that. So it's very important, and I'm so proud we have that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Zahra, you work with children. How do you do this to empower them to tell their own stories?
Well, like I encourage them to be themselves, to be genuine, not to be ashamed of their past. I tell them that our experiences, our hardships, will always make us stronger. To learn from our past, like we talked about our Afghan identity. Our past are always going to be intertwined with our present, and it's going to always reflect. So if unless we look at it in a positive way, I think it's important for us to take the positive from our past experiences and make ourselves stronger as human beings. And that's something that I've come across children who couldn't speak English, or they were insecure about their accents. But I always told them that, hey, if you have an accent, it means that you speak more than one language. There's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be embarrassed. And if you have a food that you bring in and some people look at it in a different way, you just explain to them that is you're teaching them about your culture, about your cuisine from your part of the world. So I think it's important that we have a positive outlook, and that is something that I've always tried to kind of instill in children and our family growing up, the second generation, and also the ones that I've worked with.
I'm really grateful that you brought up that aspect, because I think it all depends on whose point of view you're using to look at your current situation and how you're judging yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both. So can you tell us, what are you working on right now, your future projects?
Bahram.
Oh, it is, I can't tell very much about it, but I have written it. It is with the publisher. The illustrator of my first book, The Library Bus, she is, I don't know if I can say it, but she is doing the work, the illustrations. I'm very, very excited. This is going to be slightly a departure from what I have done so far. The story is happening in some ways in two places. It's in Afghanistan. There are flashbacks of Afghanistan, but there are also there are scenes that happen outside Afghanistan. The place is not clearly defined, like where it is, because my intention is to keep it slightly broad. But I think that is as much as I can tell about it.
No, I get it. And it's a picture book, right?
It's a picture book, yes, and it is going to be for the kind of the same age range, 6 to 8, or probably slightly older. It is. This is the first time I'm writing a male character, so it's going to be a small boy and his grandmother, and then a lot of other stories and characters.
Amazing. Can't wait to read that.
Will come up next year, so fall.
Yeah, I'm actually also working on my third book. I am hoping to finish writing it by the end of the year. It is, and then I start the process of editing. Like Bahram John, this is also a departure from what I've been working on so far. This is set in India. And I think I do have a special bond with India since I've lived there, for quite some time. But this is about a little girl. This is also for middle grade, and this is about the story of Mira, who has a very, very unique and a special bond with nature. And this is about global warming and climate change. So yes, magic realism and things that I have been working on. This is the first time. So I'm hoping that it'll be published sometimes next year.
Awesome. That's awesome. We can't wait
That's
to read that.
amazing. Yeah, we can't wait to read them both and
Thank you.
acquire them in our libraries. So yeah, our viewers will definitely have a chance to win your currently published books, either Sky Blue Bench or the Lightchaser, by sending us emails and determining which one they would like to be entered into a drawing for. But yeah, we are hoping that we could welcome you again to one of our future programs once your books are out next year. So before we wrap up, well, it's Friday evening, and as we were talking, people may look for ideas for what to eat this weekend. That's why I wanted to ask you a question about your favorite Afghan food.
Oh, I love. Well, they're all Afghan foods are delicious, and but my favorite is an eggplant dish. It's called Burani Banjan. You have to like make it in a special way, and it has to be served with there's kind of like a yogurt like dip with it, and dried mint. So that is kind of the classic way. But I think I made a point that I only like it when my mom makes it, because she exactly knows how much of like tomato, how much of eggplant, how much of like cilantro she had to put, how much she has to fry it. Because like again, I would say like Afghan food is probably similar to Iranian food too. Like it's very much based, like it's a culture based, and it is depends on each family has their own recipe of it. Like, so you probably, I think the best brownie will be my mom's, but someone else might disagree. But yeah, brownie banjan is my favorite food. If you have a chance to eat it, eat it. It's amazing. It's vegan. It's vegetarian, and it is delicious.
Awesome. How about you, Zahra?
Yeah, like I said, I love everything. I love food, period. I'm not picky, but if I had to pick something, it would be bologna. It is like a giant, I would say, pastry filled with potatoes and herbs, different spices, and sometimes people actually mix onions in the mix, and you fry it lightly, or you can deep fry it as well. But a lot of times you eat it as an appetizer, or with an afternoon tea, with a cup of tea. It's absolutely delicious. And everyone in my family knows I have this amazing love relationship with potatoes. So anything with potato, I love. And anything fried, of course, tastes so much, so much better. So yeah, if you are out, if you at an Afghan restaurant, definitely look at the appetizer section. And most places do have that, and they serve it with chutney, with a special sauce. So yes.
Fantastic. I know of a few really good Afghan restaurants here in LA, so we know where to go this weekend.
Thank you very much. That was a great conversation. Thank you, Zahra Jan. Thank you, Bahram Jan, for
Thank you.
joining this conversation today. It was great and lovely to have you both this evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Khuda
Hafiz.
Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.
And thank you all for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation with author Zahra Omar Shansab and Bahram Rahman. Please join us for the upcoming in-person programs from this series. We will host a Zoom workshop on Tuesday, November 29 at 4 p.m. at the Woodland Hills Branch Library, which is to empower you to tell your unique stories. And our exciting cultural event, Chelde or Yalda Night, is a celebration of the winter solstice, which is a central part to Afghan and Iranian cultures. Join us on Saturday, December 17 at 2 to 4 p.m. at the Woodland Hills branch for a day of poetry, music, and food. Remember to visit lapl.org/events to see more of our amazing programs. You can go to lapl.org/yourauthor to find information on other Your Author virtual programs.
Well, until next time, we truly appreciate all your support. The success of all of our library programs could not happen without you, viewers. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.